Hello and welcome back to the News Project Live on GNAT-TV's Facebook page. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on Friday, August 20th. So we're going to run through a few of the local and state stories that we've been following over the past week or so. And as always, just a quick reminder to check the comment section where you can find some links to some of the additional more information to some of the stories we'll be talking about. We're going to start off in Montpelier and just mention that last Tuesday at the governor's weekly press briefing, he and other state officials said that qualifying Vermonters can begin getting their third dose of the COVID vaccine at doctors' offices or pharmacies and pop-up clinics later this week. That announcement comes as new federal guidance that people who are moderately or severely immunocompromised and have received the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine should receive a third dose. This is, of course, as the Delta variant continues to be a factor in the whole COVID equation. Health Commissioner Mark Levine said that the category of folks that are eligible for the vaccine includes those who have had organ transplants or cancer treatments, people with congenital immunodeficiencies, advanced HIV, and folks on steroid treatments. Pop-up clinics are expected to begin administering the vaccine later this week, and attendees will have to self-attest that they have a qualifying condition. Meanwhile, turning to the COVID numbers for this week, on Thursday, there were 112 new cases around the state. That puts 26 people in the hospital, 12 in ICUs around the state, and there was one additional death reported, so that takes us up to, sadly, 270 Vermonters we've lost to COVID-19. That compares with 169 new cases reported the day before, and 22 in the hospital. 21 in the hospital, 9 in the ICU. And we're almost up to 86% of eligible Vermonters, at least partially vaccinated. We're also have a very high number who have already received both doses, but 85.9% of Vermonters have received at least one dose. The other factor that folks want to bear in mind, perhaps around the state, is that 11 of Vermont's 14 counties are now considered to be to have substantial spread or high rate of spread of the COVID virus. Those counties include Bennington County, along with Addison, Caledonia, Chittenden, Franklin, Grand Isle, Orleans, Rutland, Washington, Windham, and Windsor. And so the Centers on Disease Control is recommending indoor masking, regardless of whether or not you're vaccinated in those counties. 6 of those are in the most severe counties, and that includes, again, Bennington County, along with Addison, Chittenden, Franklin, Orleans, and Washington. Drilling down a little bit further, there were 13 new cases in Bennington County yesterday, 99 over the last 2 weeks. Neighboring counties of Rutland, 12 new cases, 95 over the last 2 weeks. In Windsor, 7 new cases, 76 in the last 2 weeks, and over in Windham, 7 new cases and 75 over the past 2 weeks. Worth noting, perhaps, that the Brattleboro Select Board has also reimposed a mask mandate for folks indoors. That had been put in place last year. It was lifted earlier this year. The Select Board there opted earlier this week in a vote to restore that mask mandate when you're inside, making them the first municipality in the state to do that. They may well not be the last, but so far Brattleboro is the only town reporting that. The main topic of interest, I guess, this week for many folks is school reopenings, which all of a sudden are right around the corner. And in a couple of weeks, school bells will be tolling again. And so we're going to be preparing a segment about that for hopefully be out next week. We had a chance to talk to Education Secretary Daniel French, who told us that basically the state is taking a local control kind of approach to pandemic mitigation this fall. And they released a two-page advisory memo for schools. And of course, these recommendations are just that, recommendations. They are not binding. So supervisory unions and school districts can opt in or opt out or adjust as they may feel their local conditions warrant. Um, the state's guidance does recommend universal masking for at least the first 2 weeks of school or the first 10 instructional days. Um, but again, they're going to defer to the local decision makers on the ground. Um, the idea is to allow local school districts to calculate the percentage of currently vaccinated students who've received 2 doses of the vaccine. And they're recommending masking for staff and students when indoors during those first 10 days of school. Masks would not necessarily be required after the first 10 days of school. Once the vaccination rate of all eligible students, and that would be everyone from 12 and above, reaches 80% of the student body. Masks will be required on school buses, will not be required outdoors. Mr. French also said that the big difference between this year and last year is that last year at this time we had a state of emergency in place, which is not the case this year. He called that an important distinction. So therefore, they're making recommendations, not regulations, despite what he called the very challenging nature of the Delta variant. And just recommending that all schools open with everyone wearing masks, and hopefully many eligible students who are 12 years old and older have already been vaccinated. Students who are 12 and under are the main concern, he said, and they're expecting that those students in that age cohort, the 12 and unders, will become eligible for the vaccine later this year. He also said that the goal is to return to in-person learning and really just not have to do remote learning again, like was the case last year. We also had a chance to talk to some of our local education leaders around the subject. The superintendent of the BRSU, Randy Lowe, said that they were planning to open the school year until further notice to have everyone wearing masks in school. And of course, most of their schools are kindergarten to 8th grade or pre-kindergarten to 8th grade, and so many of those students so far are ineligible for getting vaccines. And masks will be worn for the initial 10 days and perhaps longer. It just depends on kind of how things play out. They will not require staff and faculty to be vaccinated, believing that basically already those vaccination rates are very high. Long Trail School is also going to begin the school year next Monday, August 23rd, and over there, their protocols will follow very closely with the guidance issued by the Agency of Education. Long Trail School is also requiring that families complete a vaccine reporting form, and until the school receives the form, they'll consider that a student to be unvaccinated. So that's an additional a step there that students and families will want to be aware of. The Long Trail School is also requiring masks for everyone who's indoors for the first 2 weeks of the school year, and then they will revisit those mask rules and see how things are going. We also had a chance to speak with Headmaster Mark Tashin, headmaster of Burn Academy. The plan there is to open with masks as well for the first 10 days and follow the AOE guidance while they're gathering vaccination data to see if they are within that 80% threshold. And There could be more mask restrictions if local conditions require that, he said. He also said that he expected the vaccination rate for staff and faculty is extremely high, way up there in the high 90s. So uh, that shouldn't be too much of an issue for them there. Um, Again, it's all going to kind of hinge on the vaccination rates for the students. Freshman orientation there will start on August 30th, and everyone will be in school early in September. Fall sports will be going forward on schedule, and they should be safe being outside. And the school is also going to be hosting 2 more additional vaccination clinics, specifically targeted at the 12 to 17-year-olds, to hopefully get those as many of those as possible vaccinated. Meanwhile, in other news, next Tuesday, Dorset voters will be casting ballots on a bond vote to see whether or not they want to pay for a new town hall that would be built over on Raptor Lane off of Route 30. And voting is going to be held on Tuesday, August 24th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. over at the current town hall in East Dorset. That building is no longer fully adequate for all the needs they have over there that need more meeting space and other office space, as well as making the building, well, the new building needs to be more handicapped accessible than the current one. So we're going to be talking with Town Manager Rob Giotti the following day, Wednesday, the 25th, to get feedback on what happened and what the next steps are, assuming that vote passes. And, if it does pass and the bill for that, or the bond for that, is going to total about $3.6 million, that will be paid over, I believe, a 20-year period, but I'll have to double check that. Ground could be broken by the fall of 2022 once all the necessary permits are in place. And finally, some information on the census. Interesting numbers coming out of Vermont. Overall, the state has increased its population up to a little over 643,000 Vermonters from 625,000. That's slightly under a 3% increase. But what's kind of interesting for us is that several towns in southern Vermont, particularly resort towns, saw some big population gains over this past decade, measuring from 2010 to 2020. Dover, over in Windham County, next to Mount Snow, added 674 residents, bringing their population up to about 2,000. Their neighboring town of Marlborough received similar numbers, 644 new people, bringing their population to a little over 1,700. In Winhall, over in Bennington County, they added 413 new residents. There, of course, it's the home of Stratton Mountain Ski Resort. And so that brings their population to about 1,200. Both Bennington and Windham counties registered some population gains. Windham County grew by about 3.1%, and Bennington County grew a little bit less than that, about 0.5%, a little over 0.5%. About 37,347 folks now live in Bennington County compared to 37,125. But it's interesting also to kind of look at what towns grew and lost. On the flip side, from the resort communities, town of Rockingham lost 450 residents, and their population is now down to 4,800. In Bennington, Bennington lost about 433 residents, bringing their population down to about 15,300. Town of Pownell lost 269 people. But on the other hand, in Bennington County, Arlington increased its population by 140, Dorset by 102, and the town of Sunderland by 100. So, kind of a mixed picture there. Anyway, all kind of interesting. And of course, this will also have a big impact on redistricting, which will be also held later this year. Legislature will be redrawing some districts. Some of the most of the action is probably going to take place up in Chittenden County, which remains the by far the most populous county, and there'll be some interesting arithmetic to be done up there. Anyway, that'll do it for today. Thanks again for being with us. Um, Hope you all have a good weekend, and we'll see you again next Friday. When, just one final note, the Manchester Street Fair will be happening at 6 o'clock that evening. We'll talk about that next Friday. All right, take care, be safe, be well, have a good weekend. See you next week.